Welcome to A Lawyer's Guide to the Galaxy, a podcast about geek culture by lawyers, with your hosts, Ben Siders and Kirk Damon. Today's episode is brought to you by Chef Gourmanda, winner of the 1978 DeLorean Chef Tournament and author of the award-winning Life Day recipe book. Make your holiday special with a recipe from Chef Gourmanda.
Merry Christmas and welcome into A Lawyer's Guide to the Galaxy. I am your host, Ben Siders, and with me here, also enjoying his Christmas break, is Kirk Damon.
That's Kirk as the captain of the Enterprise.
So Merry Hansa Kwanzaa-miss. That's our amalgamation of pseudo-religious holidays.
Or just Happy Holidays.
Or Happy Festivus is probably my favorite one, especially the airing of grievances. That's a Seinfeld reference for those of you who are under the age of 40. So Kirk, this episode will hit the week of Christmas. What are your holiday plans?
We're going to go there spending it with family, I think, as is normal, what it is for us. Though we're doing a little bit differently this year in the fact that we're going to actually, head out to the family in Iowa for the first time since we've had kids. So we're going to see how that goes.
See, my family lives mostly up in Minneapolis, and we drive from St. Louis. That's right, drive to Minneapolis with 4 kids in the car every winter, and I've still never understood why we go to the frozen tundra of Minneapolis in the wintertime. We should go there in the summer and make them come down here in the winter. It's much more temperate.
Yeah, our relatives all come down here. My parents live here in St. Louis now, so it's one of those where they don't, we've already actually had our Christmas with them. We had it right after Thanksgiving, because I also have an aunt and an uncle who travel a lot, so it was one of those. It was easy for us to do it at that point in time. So we've done it at that point in time. We basically did that's what we're planning to do. But It should be fun. It'll be a little different as to what it is. I think they're looking forward to the fact that there should be like actual snow on the ground permanently. In Iowa.
We don't usually have snow here on Christmas. Sometimes we do, but there's usually not much. Like the grass always sticks out. Like I've learned to cut the grass short before it starts snowing, so it kind of looks like actual winter in St. Louis
exactly.
over Christmas.
Which is kind of nice actually when you have to shovel it. But for the kids who want to go out and have a snowball fight, I think they're looking forward to the idea of being able to go to Iowa and see that.
Yeah, my kids are always wowed by all the snow in Minneapolis. there's literally like 20-foot piles of snow in mall parking lots and whatnot, which is what I grew up with in Iowa, but we don't get that here.
Well, I grew up in Colorado where we had 20-foot tall piles of snow in the parking lot in 5 days that it was gone.
Well, today we're talking about the internet, or more specifically, how you get stuff off the internet.
Or how you don't.
Or how you don't. And the motivation for this topic is the legendary Star Wars Holiday Special, which bears explanation because hopefully, and I'm crossing my fingers literally in the studio as I say this, hopefully you've never seen it.
The Star Wars Holiday Special is one of those things which is, it's... You'd think it would be an urban legend if it wasn't true.
Yeah, I always heard about it throughout the 90s, but there was no copies out there.
I'm pretty sure I probably watched it live at some point in time when it was actually out.
You're a little older than me. You might have.
Yeah, just timing-wise, I didn't actually see the original Star Wars when it was in theaters because the fact that I was just a little bit too young to see it, according to my parents, even though a bunch of my friends saw it. So my first Star Wars in theaters was actually Empire Strikes Back.
See, I saw Jedi.
But I saw a lot of stuff on TV. So I'd seen Star Wars. I saw Star Wars on TV with ads. Because you couldn't fast forward through them in those days. I'm pretty sure I probably saw the holiday special. I remember seeing a number of other Star Wars things. I remember after Return of the Jedi, there's actually a special that's the droids go to the Ewok planet.
There were 2 cartoons. There was the Ewoks and the Droids cartoons. I remember watching those.
I remember seeing those. And so I watched a lot of Star Wars stuff. Because, I remember used to go through TV guides to see what was on TV and look for specials. And particularly around this time of year, I would seek out holiday specials for obvious reasons.
Let's lay the background here because a lot of our listeners are millennials who probably have no recollection or no conscious memory of what life used to be like when you had 3 channels.
Yeah.
And this came out in the late 70s. It was after the original Star Wars film, I think, was out of theaters.
Yep.
So it came out in May of that year, and then that Christmas, I think, was when this was done.
Yep.
Or maybe the next Christmas.
I think it may have been the next year, actually.
But it was before Empire Strikes Back.
Yep.
So it was before Boba Fett and all that kind of stuff. And it was a TV holiday special, which at the time, as Kirk just alluded to, networks were 3 channels. You had ABC, CBS, NBC. A handful of places had Fox affiliates. The town I grew up in didn't get one.
PBS was the other one.
PBS, yeah. We didn't have a Fox affiliate until the late 90s or mid-90s.
Yeah, we didn't have a Fox affiliate either.
You had 3 channels to pick from unless you had cable. At the time, cable was like $12 a month. Nobody could afford that.
We didn't even have cable.
Yeah. Well, and at the time, cable had no commercials. You remember that?
Yeah, well, I think even at this point in time, I think when this came out, I'm not even sure cable existed yet. At
this time, it may not have. Early 80s was really...
Yeah, cable came out in early 80s, and I always associated with early 80s as MTV, because that was obviously sort of the start of cable. But yeah, the other
networks
thing with holiday specials, and I think the thing to keep in mind is when you were a kid watching these holiday specials, you couldn't watch them on DVD. They got played once, maybe twice, if you were lucky, between Thanksgiving and
really
Christmas.
Have VCRs yet. Well, and at the time, you got to think of the TV cycle. Around the Christmas time, your regular weekly shows are on hiatus.
They're all
and the
reruns.
networks just need content to fill airtime. And you guys probably don't remember this, but networks used to shut off. If you stayed and watched TV for late enough, at some point they played the national anthem and went off the air.
And you got the test pattern. Yep, that was a sort of normal thing late at night. It actually used to be kind of fun to watch and see if you could see the test pattern, see the national anthem and see the test pattern. But so there was a lot of holiday specials, a lot of the holiday specials we grew up with. I think people in our generation as well, holiday specials were a big deal. And a lot of it was because you used to go through the TV guide, which used to come in the newspaper.
You only had one TV, so everybody had to watch the same thing. And so you had these holiday specials, and they were all these variety act type shows where you'd bring in popular musical acts or popular actors and just do basically a bunch of sketch bits and whatnot. Because it's nobody could really object to it. But this one is so weird and so miscalculated.
And a lot of them were associated with popular culture. You had a lot of things that sort of were things that were popular at the time becoming holiday specials or trying to catch on to things that were popular for holiday specials.
Here's all you need to know. It's a Star Wars that has Jefferson Starship in it.
And has Jefferson Starship as a prominent role too. That's the other thing with it.
So let's. Hopefully you've never seen it, but if we'll lay the background for what it is. It's kind of a story. It takes place on the Wookiee planet, and it opens with
Chewbacca's family.
With Chewbacca's family, his dad, Itchy.
Yep.
Yes,
his dad is called Itchy, truly.
His son, Lumpy.
Are we already starting to understand how this is going to go wrong?
This sounds like an article from The Onion or on Cracked. It's not. This happened. And then his wife, Mala, who has like a kind of a normal name, right? Which I don't get. We're already in Bizarro land, right? Because they call him Chewie, but Chewbacca is his actual, it's a normal name. So who wrote this and thought Itchy and Lumpy made sense for characters?
And it starts with the family. One of the things that I think is so fascinating about the holiday special is a good 2/3 of the holiday special is in Wookiee.
With no subtitles. It's just hours of Wookiee noises.
Now, admittedly, that you can figure out what they're saying because of context and things like that associated with it.
Well, they even make it weirder. So it opens up with Han and Chewie escaping Tatooine again, being pursued by the exact same 2 Star Destroyers that chased them off in the original trilogy, including the exact same footage, but in a very cheap cardboard box Millennium Falcon set, where Harrison Ford is clearly phoning it in and doesn't want to be there.
Yeah, and there's a lot of sort of things. One of the things I think you really notice as well about the Star Wars holiday special, which is very noticeable throughout it, is the lack of special effects. The special effects are very bad. Some of them are present. There's a scene in it when you encounter Luke. He's talking over a comlink, but he's working on his X-Wing, and his X-Wing
and it doesn't look like
laser
Mark
blaster.
Hamill.
Yeah,
it looks like some sort of mannequin.
No, it's right after his accident.
It was.
So
if you guys don't know, so Mark Hamill was in a car accident between Star Wars and Empire that really, I think, damaged his face.
It damaged his face very
reconstructive
badly,
surgery, and I think that's why they added the Wampa ice creature scene.
That's why the Wampa actually strikes him across the face at the beginning.
Luke Skywalker's face to explain why Mark Hamill looks so different.
And I mean, Mark Hamill, I think the thing you can really give to it, as much as people give Mark Hamill crap for the Luke Skywalker character, I think there's little doubt from his future work. Mark Hamill's an incredible actor.
Oh yeah, his voice work has been amazing.
And he's been voice work beyond that and stuff like that. And I think this is one of those things where it's, when they bring him into the Star Wars, he's there. He probably was a little bit disconnected from this just because of the nature of what it was. But the special effects, he's working on like the laser blaster on his X-Wing. And it's obviously a cardboard tube with fireworks in it. It's one of those things where you just look at it and you're like this does not look like Star Wars.
Taped a sparkler, and then just lit it and said, okay, roll the camera. Like, it's so bad.
Yeah. And I think that's actually part of what causes the holiday special problems is because you're used to the good special effects. And even the original Star Wars, you're used to the good special effects. And the special effects in it are so bad.
And the attempt to layer some sort of Star Wars story on top of this variety act is just so clumsy and poorly done. And the people they got... where I go back to is, who is this designed to appeal to? Because let's for those of you who haven't seen it, here's some of the people who are in this. B. Arthur. If you don't know who B. Arthur is, she was old in the late 70s. If you remember the Golden Girls, she was
I don't remember which one she is.
Rose?
Or me, I don't remember.
Or was that
I was
Betty
never
White?
into the Golden Girls. But
you know who Betty White is, even new millennials. You know who Betty White is. B. Arthur was her contemporary. Okay, so B. Arthur is in this. And then my favorite, Art Carney. from The Honeymooners.
Yep.
Art Carney is in this. And then Jefferson Starship. Who else was in it? There was another musical act.
Well, there's some tumblers associated with
some
it.
weird
There's
acrobatics.
Basically Chinese acrobats, or what we call Cirque du Soleil, sort of today type acrobatics.
But I mean, these are staple actors of like the 60s, right?
Yep.
And people who were in their 50s at the time this came out would have like warmly received these actors. So it seems like it was calculated to appeal to an older audience. But then it's all this like Wookiee noises and all this little kid stuff. Like, I don't understand. Maybe that's just because it's the variety act and you got to appeal to everybody.
I think the thing about it is, and it's one of the things to keep in mind, and it's anybody who does watch the holiday special, I think one of those things, especially if you didn't grow up in the era.
You can get to the first 5 minutes, you deserve a medal.
You really have to think about the fact that these things were variety acts. I mean, and that's the best way to describe it. And if you don't even know what a variety act or you haven't seen one is, in many respects,
it's like a not funny Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, or even the way I talk
words,
about it is,
Saturday
it's
Night
America's Got Talent.
Yeah.
It's America's Got Talent without the judges.
Lower production value.
And it's usually, actually known acts. And a lot of it's switching between, something as to what it is. If you haven't seen a variety act, I would actually suggest seeing one, but go see one live in Vegas.
Yeah.
Because they're good.
Yeah, they are. So this is an embarrassment. Lucas has acknowledged, I think he has a quote on one of the movies, that if he had time and a hammer, he would walk through the entire world and smash every copy of this he could find.
Anthony Daniels, in conjunction with C-3PO, I think has actually said that he would I can't remember what it was, but he truly would never participate in doing another one of these again. Han Solo almost strangles the host of Tonight's Show at the point in time that he's brought up, as sort of a running joke.
Everybody's humiliated by this.
Yes.
I have no idea who put this together, who the producers were. Clearly, there's nobody involved in this that said, no, this is a bad idea. It was just, Star Wars is hot, let's get the actors together, let's slap a bunch of crap on screen.
And a few of the things with the variety acts is the variety acts are kind of thrown into this in weird places. So the example of what is, we talked about the fact that there's gymnasts. That's actually done on a holo table, so where they play the holo table game to entertain Chewbacca's son. Mm-hmm. And it's
Lumpy.
one of those lumpy. I just can't sell him Lumpy. I'll burst out laughing. Yeah, but it's one of those where
the Wookiee costumes are creepy.
Yeah.
Like Chewbacca's well enough done, but these Wookiee costumes are like Little Shop of Horrors puppets. It's just... It's hard to watch.
That's the other thing where, that's getting to the variety acts. There's a later scene where there's Imperial stormtroopers and Imperial forces inside the Wookiee home.
A lot of recycled footage from the movies.
Yeah, and they actually, again, sort of, the Jefferson Starship is presented as a music video to entertain Lumpy. And, things like that.
Predicting what we would later do, which is hand our kids iPads and tell them to be quiet.
Exactly, while, the police are storming around our house. But, the other thing that you sort of get into it, I think the weirdest one is the one that's joked about it, which is commonly referred to, and you'll see it as Wookiee porn, which is a headset which is actually given to Chewbacca's father.
It's kind of like a VR.
Yeah, it's a VR type of thing almost as to what it is. And the best way I describe what he's watching through it is go watch the introduction to a James Bond movie from the 70s.
All this weird, abstract, moving stuff.
Yeah, and it's mostly dancers.
The way I assume they told the actor in the suit, get excited.
Yeah.
But since it's a guy in a suit who can't emote, he looks like he's getting excited in a way that's not appropriate for television.
Yeah, and again, he's also wearing what actually is a VR headset, so it also looks kind of weird, because you can't see facial expression at all.
That did not age well.
So that's the kind of things you got to keep in mind. And there's this loose plot, and basically the loose plot is the idea of Chewbacca trying to get back to his home for what's Life
Day. Yeah.
That's a lot of celebration. The droids are sort of involved in this. There's a lot of discussion. That's where Luke comes in. They're trying to find him. That's involving this escape from Tatooine. And a lot of the key elements is actually the fact that essentially the Imperium, and the one thing that is sort of in some sense a redeeming value of the holiday special is the Empire is actually presented as an oppressive government.
Well, the one really interesting thing that they did introduce, this is where Boba Fett makes his debut.
Boba Fett does make his debut in this.
Very odd 1970s era animated portion. Where Harrison Ford...
Again, think variety show. They added some animation in this.
Han Solo looks like he has had reconstructive jaw surgery or something. Something is very badly wrong with his
he's very, very strange
proportions. But they introduced Boba Fett like riding on a dinosaur, and it's weird. It's actually not that bad. Like if you watch any part of it, just go to that part. But that's where the Boba Fett character is introduced.
And again, variety show. So they introduced stuff with animation. So they had animated sequences discussing this, and that gets at some of the stuff on Tatooine and the idea of what had happened on Tatooine.
All of this would have died a deserving death a long time ago, except something happened that nobody expected, which is the internet was born.
Exactly.
The commercial internet,
and
I should say.
particularly YouTube, I think.
And it was born in an era where those of us who grew up with Star Wars were the main population of people who knew how to use it.
Yep.
And at some point, I heard about this damn thing during the 90s, and at some point, we all did.
Yeah.
And those of us who didn't remember it wanted to see it, right? Because there was no other Star Wars content. And I don't know how it happened. I'm sure Usenet was responsible. It has been preserved is the bottom line.
Yep.
And as you know, once something is on the internet once, it's there forever.
Yeah.
And I actually found this just sitting on YouTube.
Yeah, there's also copies of it on YouTube. What I think is interesting is that it's become sort of enough of a cult phenomenon that people actually have tried to get good versions of it, preserved versions. The version I watched was actually apparently a remaster of an original, so it actually didn't have the ad in it. Ad breaks, but there was no ads removed.
Yeah, like the studio or the network that had it they're never going to release it.
Yeah.
I don't know if they probably burned the original footage. So
Yeah,
it's been preserved through the de facto archiving facilities.
But even to go through the idea of the de facto things of the archiving facilities, one of the things I think is really interesting, I happened to watch this afterwards, people have even posted what's in the original ad breaks. So you can actually watch all the original advertisements that appeared during the course of it, which are themselves actually, I think, a fun sort of explanation of
a lot of Pan Am Airlines ads.
Actually, there's a lot of ads for Contac, the old cold medicine. And you can see the what I also think is interesting in watching the ads is you actually see the nature of one of the things that'll strike you when watching the holiday episode today is the TV looks a lot different. Mm-hmm. When you watch the ads, you realize that was the TV, that the way the things are acted.
Look, yeah.
So again, like a lot of the ads are very static.
Didn't you say too? You saw a news break when you watched it.
Yes,
talking about
there is a news
Brezhnev
break
or somebody in the
there
Soviet
is a
Union.
news break, which I have to admit, if we were to change the name, sounds disturbingly like something that could be on the news today. Yeah, it was discussing Soviet meddling in conjunction with the United States and Brezhnev. But it's also what I think, and again, one of those things that I think it's worth watching. If you do feel the need to go back and actually watch this for yourself, go and watch those ads just because it does give you a little bit of an idea of just how different the world was. And when you watch that news break, realize at this point in time, there's no CNN, there's no internet for the news. Your news is basically newspapers or the television or radio. And, this news break was giving you an update on what happened. And what I think is so funny about it is there's like 2 to 3 very serious stories. And you got to realize each of these is like 2 sentences. That's all they say. And then there's the feel-good holiday story at the very end. And I'm not going to tell you what that one is. But it's one of those where you get kind of this interesting sort of understanding of just sort of the difference in the nature of the world, which also I think, quite frankly, does give you a better appreciation for the holiday special and the fact that while it's so weird, particularly under modern circumstances, it wasn't quite as weird.
Particularly for those of you who have no conscious memory of life before the internet. Kirk and I obviously do. We lived through these dark times. But if it's worth seeing that part just to see what we went through before you could just get online.
If you cannot make the sound of a modem, then you wouldn't actually understand most of this.
ATDT.
That's all you need to say.
That's a joke only people over 40 will get. Okay, so a combination of factors have enabled, not only the Star Wars holiday special, but other embarrassing things to be preserved ad infinitum. And that is, one, it's easier than ever to catch people doing embarrassing things because all of us have high-powered cameras at our beck and call all the time.
Yep. And that's definitely a change. I mean, it used to be that a camera was, hey, something you took still pictures with and you had to get them developed. And if they could be developed in what was originally 2 hours, then 1 hour, then I think 10 minutes, that was incredible.
And that wasn't even the case 10 years ago. I mean, the original iPhones didn't take video out of the box, I don't think.
Now, phones did, obviously, and have for a while. But I mean, I remember at times when I used to, go out, for work and things like that, there were places where you could not bring cameras in. Mm-hmm. And that means you couldn't bring your cell phones. You had to drop your cell phones if they had a camera in them. So a lot of people purposely had cell phones that did not have cameras.
Well, we go to court sometimes just to get that. I mean, depending on where you go, they will or will not allow cell phones. You turn them off sometimes. So,
but a lot of it's more to distraction. This was because you couldn't have the cameras. And so you could only bring a cell phone if it didn't have a camera. And
most judges don't want live cameras in the courtroom of any kind, news or otherwise. Okay, also, storage and bandwidth are cheap, and we have free sharing tools on universally available platforms. And I think most importantly, reproducing an infinite number of copies of anything is literally a push of a button.
Yeah. I think the other thing with it is that the uploading and the creation of content has just ballooned. I mean, we talk about the idea of, big data and stuff like that. One of my favorite quotes on this, I heard this a number of years ago, but I presume it's still true. And the statistic was that every 7 minutes, there is more content added to the internet on YouTube than has been broadcast on broadcast TV ever.
That makes sense.
And it's one of those, when you think about that,
I think broadcast TV is a small category.
Yeah, that's those 3 channels we were talking about effectively. I mean, you had Fox and later and potentially PBS. But it's one of those things where you say, from the entirety of broadcast TV has had less content that is uploaded in 7 minutes to YouTube. And so you look at it and say, we can upload in 7 minutes, we can upload everything that ever appeared on broadcast TV. So, when you talk about something like this, there's just an incredible amount of data out there.
Well, a final factor I think is important is that once you try to make an effort to scrub something off the internet, there is what I call the disobedient sector of the internet. And these are the people who, the minute you say you can't have it, they insist on having it, even if they don't care about it. There are people who would, if Disney ever came out and said, we're going to actively scrub all copies of this off the internet, you would have a small army of people who have never watched it and don't care, but would try to preserve it just to thwart Disney.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's part of the reason why, in some sense, they're not going to take it down. They're never going to officially release it, but I don't think they're ever going to try to stop the people from distributing.
And like I said, I found it on YouTube.
Yeah, it's on YouTube.
You don't have to go look anywhere really all that hard to find. It's sitting there on YouTube, and whoever owns the copyright to it, if anybody's willing to claim it, could send a takedown notice, which we're going to talk about next. What can you do to get rid of stuff online? And sneak preview, spoiler alert, the answer is you can't really get rid of everything.
Yeah, and I think where this comes from, a lot of it, and to give you some legal background with it, there's obviously things that get posted to the internet that people would like to have removed, that are negative to them, that may not be true even.
Like Donald Trump's entire Wikipedia page. Or really, insert political candidate here during an election cycle.
Yeah. And the stuff you get into, but I mean, even for just average people, there's things that potentially can show up on the internet, which is things that in some sense would want to be forgotten. And, Europe has recently passed the sort of right to be forgotten type of legislation. The idea of trying to say, we should have some privacy with things that basically said if something's made public, which we intended to be private, there should be a way to claw it back. And
Europe's been generally ahead of the curve on privacy and data privacy issues. The U.S. has kind of left things up to a more piecemeal, state-by-state, with some exceptions at the federal level. But for the most part, we don't have a lot of comprehensive national-level laws that govern this kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think again, sort of one of the things I think you really bump into in conjunction with this is you have that sort of disobedient section of the internet that kind of looks at the idea. It says we should keep it just because it should be kept because people want to remove it. And the reality of it is, and again, for those of you who didn't grow up, before the internet, it used to be that things were forgotten because you had to remember it. Mm-hmm. So again, I come to the idea and say, hey, what was on, TV at this point in time? Hey, did you see the show? You watched Frosty the Snowman one year. The next time you saw it was a year later, So the idea of trying to remember exactly what happened in it or, specific things of it, it was entirely a personal memory type of thing. And you really did have stuff get forgotten in a way that the internet has pretty much destroyed.
Yeah, I remember my dad in 1985. So my dad was an Iowa alum like I am. I remember in 85, we finally had a VCR. And he recorded every Iowa football game that was on TV. And I have to put that qualifier in because back then, not every game was on even local TV. Yep. But he recorded them all on VHS tapes. They are all still sitting in a box in our basement somewhere, but now they're all on YouTube.
Yeah. And that's because they had, professional recordings of them that were made because of the broadcasting.
But some stuff was lost, right? Yeah. Some of those games were not recorded, and so they're just gone.
Yeah. I mean, to use as an example of things that, the idea that this is a good thing in some respects, we need to look no further than sort of major historic events and the fact that we'd like more coverage of them. I think the best example, and for those of you who know the story, is let's talk about the moon landing. Mm-hmm. Why is the moon landing film so grainy? Because they filmed the TV. Because they
lost the original footage.
Well, and the format that it was sent back. Yeah, they taped over it. The format that was sent back from the original moon lander was brilliantly clear, as you see in the later
the photos are very clear.
And stuff, and you see from the later videos from the later moon landings.
No atmospheric interference probably helps with that. But.
Well, but the original one, the problem with it is it was an incompatible format with TV, so they couldn't broadcast it live. So the way they broadcast it live is they filmed the TV playing it, which is why it's grainy. Then they inadvertently recorded over it. One looks at it and says, had this thing have existed, that had been the case now, that was broadcast, they would have recorded over that DVD. There'd be thousands of people who had copies of it.
Oh, yeah.
If they'd gotten off the initial internet from recording it. So there is a value to the fact that the internet doesn't forget.
Let's talk about some of the things you can do to get stuff taken offline. And all of this goes with the caveat that, responsible, normal, law-abiding websites and hosts will generally cooperate and follow these rules. But like we said, there's a disobedient sector that will not. And there are people who will stand on their rights or move stuff overseas or try and find ways to preserve things. So although you can maybe get things taken down from most legitimate websites, Kirk and I call it the first page problem. You can get it off the first page of Google, which for most purposes means it may as well not exist.
Yep.
So the main one is called the DMCA. That stands for Digital Millennium Copyright Act.
That means 2000. Think about that as that's when this was written.
Late 90s Clinton-era regulations that were meant to modernize the then very dated Copyright Act, which was written in 1976, and I guess it's still around. But to update that to deal with the internet, and this is post Napster existing, but pre anybody realizing it. So
kind of, yeah.
I mean, I was aware of it, but I don't think the movie or the music industry had really tuned into it yet at the time.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely was a lot of stuff that was sort of out there. I mean, you had the sort of MP3s showing up. Napster, I think, was relatively new. Mm-hmm. Prior to that, there'd been just a lot of just trading on the internet, of music and people posting.
People used
and
to
stuff
just use FTP sites and Usenet, and that stuff's all still around. Like for all the hand wringing in the industry over file sharing and BitTorrent, there still is a very, very lively Usenet out there, which is where probably most piracy is taking place outside of BitTorrent. Yeah,
and I think that's the thing that you've got with it is you had this sort of, this internet was a relatively new thing. I mean, I think for the most part, most people, you're not going to really be talking about access to the internet until you're getting into at least late 90s.
Yeah, I'd say early 2000s was when broadband rollout had hit enough urban areas that most, not most, but a majority of people at least could get connected.
I mean,
but before that, it was the AOL theme parks, like my parents were on AOL until the late 90s, until I finally said, will you just call Charter and get regular internet?
Yeah. I mean, I joked about it because in 1992, I mean, when I was a senior in high school, I took a class over the internet. That meant it was emailed to us.
Yeah.
And things like that. And it's, that was an incredible thing. We had to go to a computer lab to do it, and half the time it worked and half the time it didn't.
Right? When you had a modem, you would log in, download all your emails to, Eudora.
Yeah.
Disconnect. You'd write all your responses to all your emails on your computer, then log back in and upload them.
Yeah. And you hoped nobody would send you an image because it took too dang long to download it.
And you'd hope nobody called and knocked you off, although you could shut off call waiting.
Yeah, you could shut off call waiting.
Anyway, so the DMCA has something called a takedown request, and that is where if a website like a YouTube or just like any site host is hosting copies of material that you own the copyright to, you can send them under the DMCA a takedown request where you say, look, you've got this stuff, it's mine, I do not give you permission to have it, so you need to take it down. And the host is required to respond to this relatively quickly. Yep. And in my experience, most Facebook and YouTube, they usually respond within a couple of days, sometimes a week.
Yeah, it depends a lot on what it is. And the other thing with it is that basically the ability to respond to a takedown request and receive takedown requests provides them with some protection against liability for having been posted in the first place.
Yeah, so they get immunity from contributory copyright infringement accusations, basically, which otherwise, it's questionable whether they'd be subject to that. But they register an agent with the government so you know who receives the notice, and then it's basically an expedited injunction. I mean, for lack of a better term, a judge doesn't actually order them to do anything, but for all practical purposes, the service provider has a highly motivating incentive to comply and take it down. But they also have to tell the person who posted it, by the way, we took this down. Yeah. And if that person says, no, they don't own it, I own it, or they just say, it's a fair use, and I'm going to stand by my use, then you can put it back, but then the ISP is out. And it's just between the content owner and the person who posted it. And either way, the ISP is not responsible.
One of the key things to keep in mind is this is about hosts. So we're usually talking about ISPs in conjunction with it. Another thing just keep in mind, sort of, again, big law point, I think when this episode will air, we have just a few days before actually the original requirements to who you post as your DMCA notice and takedown person will expire.
Yeah, if you provided a prior DMCA agent using the old paper system, which has been in place since this act was enacted, those will all be no good after the first of the year, or as of the first of the year.
Yep, so they have to actually be now done via the internet. If you are somebody with that, definitely contact an attorney or contact your people running to make sure you get it taken care of, because that is a major legal issue because of the protection from liability that's granted by having these procedures in place.
So the DMCA is nice. It gets stuff taken offline pretty quickly. I've used it. You've used it. Yep. I mean, almost any lawyer has probably used this at some point. But it has a couple of shortcomings. One is the content has to be copyrighted. And the problem is sometimes what you want to have taken down, you don't own the copyright to. And the main example I'm thinking of is, hey, that guy's posting a picture of me on his website.
Yep.
Okay. If the picture is of you, almost by definition, you're not the author of it.
Oh, come now. With selfies today, you're probably the author of it. But yeah, one of the problems you have is you have to be the owner of the copyright. And you have to be able to prove it in some sense, too, to be able to at least have them take you seriously. And that can be an issue. Now, obviously, this works if you own a movie, you own a something that's just obviously sort of accepted copyrighted content.
Yeah, it works pretty well if you have a clear, if the Star Wars Holiday Special, whoever posted that is never going to claim ownership of it. So that could get taken down. Another limitation is that this is a United States statute. So all you really need to do is, find a host overseas somewhere that's not subject to it and let them do it.
Yep. The other problem you definitely bump into, I think, with DMCA is it's a bit of a whack-a-mole. You have the problem that, hey, if somebody's got something that they want up there, you can send DMC takedown requests, but can you send them fast enough with the sites that are reposting it? And can you even find them all in the first place to send them DMCA takedowns?
Well, how do you get stuff off of BitTorrent? I mean, so the torrent site itself is overseas. How do you go find out who all is hosting bits and pieces and feeding the torrent? It's, like I said, it's whack-a-mole, and it's a futile.
The big thing with the DMCA is a lot of times, again, you think about this as large actors, well-behaved actors. You need to get something off YouTube, they're going to listen to you. You need to get something off Facebook, they're going to listen to you. These are well-established large sites. You need to get something off of a site which is trying to be quasi-legal. Trying to do this is going to be hard,
Another option is something called the UDRP. This is the Uniform Domain Name Dispute Resolution Procedure. This is very limited. It only applies to domain names. And this is where somebody has actually registered a domain name that is effectively infringing a trademark that you own. Usually this is I think this is not legislation. This is voluntary. This is handled by the sort of the oversight company, ICANN, that kind of runs the internet's addressing space.
And then is it W3? Is that the other company that was
involved?
Yeah,
W3 is more of a standards organization, but ICANN is commissioned by, I think, the Department of Commerce to manage the address space for the public internet. And they accredit companies to register domain names. And they are required to make you agree to this UDRP process, which is basically a glorified arbitration. It's not even glorified. It just is an arbitration. It's a very accelerated arbitration. And at the end of the day, if you submit an arbitration request, the other person has to participate. If you win, you get the domain name, or it gets canceled. But this requires that you have a trademark interest in the domain name.
And a provable trademark interest.
Yeah, a provable trademark interest. And it also, defenses are available. First Amendment defenses are available. Comment and criticism defenses are available, or prior use defenses are available. So if you, the example I always think of is this website, moosehead.com, which is now owned by Moosehead Brewing. But I knew the guy who originally registered it way back in the day, and he used it for an online game, and the game itself was of a sort of raunchy nature, and the website reflected that, which was much to the chagrin of Moosehead Brewing once they discovered the internet, about 10 years later, and said, hey, this is our trademark, and people keep going to your raunchy website and getting offended. Give that to us. And my friend Rusty said, no, I've been using it legitimately for my game since, 1991, so go pound sand unless you want to give me a lot of money, which I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure at some point Moosehead must have done because they own it now. So there's that too. The only other real option you have, in the U.S. at least, is to file a lawsuit to get something taken down, but you still have to have a legal theory about why it can't be there. And usually people want stuff taken down because it's defamatory, which sometimes can happen, but your remedy for defamation is usually tort damages.
And one thing to mention on the UDRP, and I think it's also just before we move completely into lawsuits, the UDRP in many respects is also sort of written for a past internet. It's written for an internet that's very focused on cyber squatting, and if it doesn't know what that is, it was something that used to be big, where basically the idea was you tried to get domain names so that people would inadvertently go to your site based upon your domain name. And nobody really does that anymore. And part of the reason that it is because search engines have gotten better. It used to be that when you needed to find a particular location like Moosehead Brewing, you would type in the company's name. That would be the assumption is what
the domain name was the hotness, right? Like you had to have that. If you didn't have the hot domain name, I mean, a good domain name would sell for 6 figures easily. But anymore, I couldn't tell you the last time I actually went to a website by domain name. I go to Google, I type in what I want, and Google finds it for me.
And that's, I think, a lot of the things, Google in some sense has changed. I think the search engine has changed it, but particularly Google. And that's one of the things that's interesting about the UDRP. A lot of the way the UDRP gets used now is to go after and get domain names that aren't necessarily your trademark exactly, but are related enough to your trademark, or similar enough that they are causing some confusion. So people who end up there think it's your official site, even
usually
though it's not.
More scamming, phishing, things like that, where there's typo squatting and they invert letters and things to trick people. So that's more what that's used for anymore. But for lawsuits are probably all that's really left. These are mostly going to be state law solutions where you're talking about rights of privacy. You want pictures of yourself taken offline, that the copyright belongs to somebody else. And this is kind of a mishmash of different state law regimes. There's no real comprehensive federal law on this.
And this is kind of what Europe was trying to sort of, I think, make comprehensive.
Now, one thing, there are some what I call de facto exceptions to this rule, which is photos depicting children. I think most companies, even illegitimate companies, will hurry to get rid of them because, one, there is COPA, the Children's Online Privacy and Protection Act, which governs some of this stuff. But I think people just sort of intuitively know that just ain't cool, man. Yeah. And so they're going to respond to those.
I think it's also worth noting COPA actually truly has some teeth behind it. But it's also, COPA is very specific as to what you can and can't do when it comes to children. Mm-hmm. It relates to privacy policies. A lot of to comply with COPA and again protect yourself from liability, you have to agree to do a lot of things when it comes to minors that you want to agree to get that protection from liability.
The other major category where I think a lot of sites are responsive, whether or not you own the copyright to what's like a takedown request, is revenge porn, which has become a big deal to the point where more than 30 states now have anti-revenge porn laws that provide, in some cases, criminal sanctions for posting this kind of material.
Yep. I think we're starting to see a lot of sort of things coming out. And as much as it's a relevant topic right now, and it's been talked about a lot sort of in the last few weeks and probably seemingly been talked about when time this is going to air. The idea of weaponizing the internet. Yeah. It's something that's been talked about a lot. You've heard some guys on Facebook talk about it. They were talking about it in conjunction with Russian meddling with the election. The idea that we've expected the internet to become this open exploitative ideals, it's a public square, so to speak. People are starting to discover potentially how to use the soapbox as a weapon. Mm-hmm. And it's something where that's been done. And it's been done previously, and there's already some laws that are sort of coming into play in relationship to it. But a lot of it has to do with this fact that the internet can't forget. The internet has a very long memory. And so by the very act of doing something like this, you can't get it back.
You can't unring the bell.
Yeah, you can't unring the bell. I mean, that really is a sort of very important element with this. And a lot of the law in this is not trying to unring the bell. It's trying to compensate somebody for it, or it's trying to discourage you from ringing it in the first place because of the risk.
Minimize how many people can hear it, ultimately. Yeah. One of the things we also deal with this, because you can't get stuff offline, and Kirk and I have helped people before with trying to scrub things that they don't want off the internet, and it can't be done. The bottom line is there is no legal tool that can do this. Even if there was a legal tool, it wouldn't work just because of the distributed nature of the internet. It would not be a complete solution. So what we often see people do, and mostly successfully, is whitewashing the front page of Google, is putting enough other content out there so that Google will index stuff that you do want people to see if they Google your name, for example, and not see the stuff that you don't.
And a lot of times it's also just, quite frankly, letting it die. Yeah. Which is, if people are not searching for it, it falls off Google's front page.
The more you fight, kind of the more you provide Google's indexing with a motivation to keep indexing.
Now, we are picking on Google here because, Google's by far the largest search engine. Yeah. But, it's any search engine. Yeah. But a lot of what I think you also have to keep in mind with, while the internet has a very long memory, the internet also has a lot of content. Mm-hmm. And the reality of it is I can take a document and I can hide it in the Library of Congress and you'll never find it. Because there's so much documentation there.
Harder to find there than on the internet.
Yeah, let's talk about at the plot of sort of any movie, like National Treasure or something like that. The idea of hiding things in plain sight. The internet allows us to do that. There can be huge amounts of content on the internet which just nobody will ever find. One of the ones I remember again talking about is I remember there was a channel for a while, I think it was Pandora, had a channel where you could actually play music that had never been played. And once you played it was removed from the playlist for everybody.
Before?
Yeah. So there was literally one, and you could play hours upon hours of this stuff, as to what those. There's huge amounts of data out there which disappears. So a lot of it is, and I think a lot of the technical solution is, the internet never forgets, but it disappears into the archive.
It has a long memory, but it also has a short attention span.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. It has a very short attention span. So a lot of times what you see in conjunction with these lawsuits and things like that is people basically trying to capitalize on the idea of the attention span is going to go away. And a lot of times the reason you see lawsuits or proceedings or DMCA takedowns and stuff like that, in some sense, is just trying to get it quicker.
Just cleaning stuff up.
Yeah. To knock off quicker.
All right. Well, that's all for today. Next time is Mailbag Day. We already have a ton of questions for it, and due to the holiday season, we're actually recording this episode in advance. So by the time you listen to this, the Mailbag episode will already be recorded. That said, please continue to send in your questions. We do use them. We read them all. We will read them all on the air, and we will talk about them. So you will be famous to literally dozens of people.
Yeah, and it'll be on the internet forever, so don't send us something you don't want us to talk about.
You will be immortalized. So send your questions to us on Twitter at LGGPod, email us at lggpodcast@gmail.com, or talk to us on our Facebook page. Search for Lawyer's Guide to the Galaxy. If you like what we're doing, give us a review. We appreciate the reviews. It helps other people find us. And you can also find Kirk and I on the social networks. I am on Twitter at Benjamin Siders, and Kirk is at Kirk Damon. That's DMN.
Yep, I use the abbreviation just because it's shorter, so it's a little easier to find.
Indeed.
That's an old UDRP sort of, using the domain name issue.
Okay, there's the music. It's time to go. Thank you again to the official LGG band, Lorem Ipsum, and the Scriveners. Lorem, play us out. Oh, and Merry Christmas.
The views expressed by the participants of this program are their own and do not represent the views of, nor are they endorsed by Lewis Rice LLC, its officers, directors, employees, agents, representatives, shareholders, and subsidiaries. None of the content should be considered legal advice. As always, consult a lawyer. This podcast was produced and recorded at Cool Fire Studios in St. Louis, Missouri.